Hello and welcome back. So this was going to be like a Christmas, all the Christmas episodes and Christmas books I like, but then, Percy Jackson came out, so we're going to do that instead. Also, thank you so much, Uncle Rick, for that coming out hours early. I love it. So I'm just going to hop right in because there's a lot. So I went back and kind of skimmed over the parts of the book that were part of last night, or a part of the show. So it's pretty much chapters 1 through half of 9 was episode 1 and 2. Episode 1 was very much chapters 1 through 4. So we're going to start with that. The show definitely sets up, I have all my notes on here. The show definitely sets up Percy's backstory much differently, of seeing him young and seeing the monsters, like Rhino and things like that, and his professors or his teachers making him think that he's crazy because of it. That's all very different, whereas in the book we start off right with the Yancey Academy, the trip to the Met. But the introduction where he is first I don't want to be half blah, blah, blah. That's all pretty much directly from the book. That was good. That was nice. Then also at the museum, he had the hallucination with his mom. That was very different. That wasn't in the books. We didn't have the back history with Mr. Bruner and Mrs. Dodds, back at the school before they went to the museum. Didn't have that, but Mr. Bruner did catch Nancy, did really encourage him, after being done in the museum, encouraged him to know what the stories are. The thing that I found interesting was that the fight with Miss Dodd happened in a different place in the books. It was more similar to the movie, which I didn't think I'd actually be saying that, of the fact that in the show the fight happened outside right after he pushed Nancy, or the water took Nancy. And Mr. Bruner hopped in with a pen, but Mr. Bruner had given him, I'm probably saying that right, his name's not actually Mr. Bruner. Yeah, it is Mr. Bruner. Mr. Bruner gave Percy the pen earlier, and it vibrated, and that's how you need to take off the cap to make it. The fight wasn't as big in the show as it was in the books. And Mr. Bruner and Grover didn't really see the fight, whereas in the books, Mr. Bruner was there. But right after was very similar. Who's Mrs. Dodds? There was never a Mrs. Dodds. What are you talking about? Kind of thing. But Grover had tried taking the blame for Percy in the books of no, I pushed Nancy. When Miss Dodds was just you did it. But in the show, as we saw, he had that confliction of, do I rat Percy out so that way he can leave the school because it's obviously not safe? Or do I be his friend? And he obviously ratted him out, where we didn't have that in the books. I think that was a great addition, because they also didn't have we saw that Percy got expelled at that moment, whereas in the books he just didn't get invited back for the next year. So we didn't have the scene with Grover and Mr. Bruner talking in Mr. Bruner's office and Percy overhearing he does in the books. We didn't have that. So I think if you're not going to have that part of it, swapping that out for Grover still trying to protect him was really good. So then we also don't see the Fates. There's no getting on the bus and seeing the Fates cut the string. Yeah, I think I saw that in a preview though, so I think that's coming later. We just didn't get that immediately. It's interesting seeing how they're rearranging some of this stuff. The next thing was Gabe doesn't have a job. His job is poker or betting online, whereas in the books he owns a Mega Mart something, or he runs a Mega Mart or something like that. He does have a job. Something I did like was that Sally had so much sass with Gabe. She stands up to him a little bit more than she does in the books, where in the books he's very kind of complacent. I liked that. And Sally did not work at a candy store or at least wasn't wearing her uniform or mentioned working in a candy store in the show. Sally seems a little bit more free, I guess, which I like. I'm not upset about it at all. The dreams are very different. The dreams that Percy's having in the show are not the dreams that he has in the books, which makes me very interested. And then the speech that Sally gives Percy at the cabin in Montauk was not in the books, but like everything is explained to Percy in the books. Everything's explained to Percy once he gets to Camp Half-Blood. Honestly, I saw some people say that they didn't like the way that it was delivered. I loved the fact that Sally was the one who told him, or like tried explaining everything before Grover got there. And it wasn't just like Grover trying to find them because the Minotaur was coming. I liked the way that Sally delivered it, and the whole "you're not broken, you're singular." Honestly, I liked it. I think that was a good switch. And we also get to see more of like Percy's like, "No, what are you talking about? I'm broken. Like, these things aren't real, just like everyone made me believe that they weren't real." I thought that was a good twist. In the books, Grover is unconscious after they get in an accident, whereas in the show, he was injured but not unconscious. I thought that was a good kind of twist. So like Grover was there for all of it, and then Sally is the one who went full matador, where in the books Percy does it, like right down to the red raincoat, which I thought was really interesting. Also, like Percy taking down the Minotaur, it looked exactly like Harry taking down the troll in Sorcerer's Stone, which was fun, which is kind of fun, like little similarity. But overall, I liked the first episode. I see why people, like, there's some people who are like, oh, like it was a little slow for me. People who didn't read the books are just like, I don't know. But you have to remember, the biggest thing to remember is that the author of the books wrote the show. So obviously he wants us to see this part. Like, there was parts of this that like he wanted us to see. He wanted us to know these things, so that way he could set, like, that was very much setting stuff up. So I think that's really important to remember. All right, so episode 2, which was chapters 5 through part of 9. Percy, like, coming to being in, like, the big house, or, like, all that was very different. I liked in the show, we had, like, the little flash of Annabeth saying, "You drool in your sleep." And then he goes back to sleep. There was no ambrosia, no nectar. We have no explanation of what that was, which I kind of was sad about. I want them to explain ambrosia and nectar. I want to see what they make it look like. It's much more, Grover understands a little bit more that Percy is sad about this. Percy's much more like, I need to go find my father. He's here. Where is he? He leaves on his own. Like, Chiron and Mr. D are not waiting for him. I loved Mr. D being like, "I'm your dad. Go get me alcohol." We had like a little bit explanation of like when gods are banned to do something, humans could go do it for them. That was interesting. I was just like, that was very much added in for something that's either later down the line or something like that was specifically added in by Rick. And Rick did say that like there were the things that he added was to set some other stuff up. So that's where I'm like, every single time something's added, I was like, oh, Rick did this on purpose. What is the purpose? So that was something. I loved Mr. D's act. The casting in this is incredible. Loved Mr. D. In the books, there was the explanation of why, like, the gods being in America, Heart of the West, all of that. Like, Chiron did a lot more explaining in the books than he did in the show, which I wonder if some of that got cut. But I kind of wish, like, there's some of this, like, explanation that, like, yes, we got a lot of explanation from Sally. But there's still some more missing about, like, the gods themselves. And we didn't get, like, thunder every single time that Percy says something he's not supposed to say. We didn't get any explanation that like about the attic or the strawberry fields. That wasn't mentioned. We kind of saw the strawberry fields, but it wasn't mentioned that that's how they get their income. They didn't mention that Percy was Grover's second chance. Also, Grover's 28 in the books, but 24 in the show. I'm 24 line in the show, best line. I loved that line. It was so funny. Grover's really funny in the show, which I like. Also, and the other thing that I thought was odd was that Annabeth is in the show a lot less than she was in the books. In the books, it's Annabeth who shows Percy around, not Luke. I thought that was a little odd. Annabeth's character in the show seems to be very different than it is in the books as of right now. But that could just be we haven't really gotten to see her as much yet. So I'm curious. And in the books, Percy isn't as obsessed with getting glory or finding glory so that way he can show his dad or like meet his dad or things like that. That's not how it is in the books. There's also no mention of the prophecy, or mention of the location of Olympus that is on the 600th floor of the Empire State Building. The show is definitely adding a little bit more suspense to the quest, where in the book at this point, they've already mentioned they went to Olympus during the winter solstice. There's a summer solstice deadline, something between the gods are like they're fighting, but like that's already been kind of hinted at, where in the show everyone is shushed at the even mention of it. So that's quite interesting in my opinion. The dinner scene was also really different. Like Luke explained a lot more. Honestly, they laid more out with like the dinner scene in the show, whereas in the books, like it just kind of happens. But like in the show, we get more of, yep, like you can pray to them, they'll hear it, whatever you miss most, more they'll listen. And then we got the new scene with Percy burning the blue candy. Also at this point, Percy doesn't have any inclination that Sally could be alive. We also didn't, like in the show, we got kind of Luke bringing him to like different parts to see what he would, like different parts of the camp to see what he'd be good at. And we got the badass disabled camper, which I was very happy and excited about. But we didn't get to see Luke being a good swordsman. No one's mentioned that he's the best swordsman in 300 years yet. So I hope that we get that inclination that he's really good. Grover, like there's also no mention of Grover's searcher license yet. Like we saw him go to the Coven of Elders, but we didn't, Cloven? Or I don't know, like we saw him go to that, but it wasn't about his like judgment about whether or not he's gonna progress on. It was more about what happened with Sally, which was weird. So in the book, the deal between the big three not having kids is made to be like, it is a big deal. In the show, it seemed a little bit more casual. They didn't mention that it was a promise on the river Styx or anything like that. But in the book, it is. So I'm intrigued to see if that's good. Like, they didn't say that it was pretty much like illegal for the big three to have kids. And then also Talia, or in the show it's Thalia, which I know, okay, Rick, if that's how you pronounce it, that's fine. But for me, it's always going to be Talia. I don't know if I can do it. It's almost like the stories were flipped, because in the show we get Luke telling Percy about Annabeth and Luke and Talia getting there. No mention of Grover. But I remember that story coming much later when Annabeth kind of explains why she can't go against Luke. Whereas now we got, or in the books, we get the story of how Talia came with a couple other campers. Grover had led them. No, not even Grover, just that she came with a couple other campers, made her last stand at the tree, and Zeus turned her into a tree. Like, we got that story. So it's interesting that all of that is switched. I'm curious on when we're going to get the tree story then, and how long that's going to be. So just a few more things left. The fight scene with Clarice, that was pretty spot on. Like, a few people said things differently, or like different people said that, like Clarice said the line about the dessert, not one of our goons. Annabeth wasn't there the entire time, but like Annabeth had set him up because they knew Clarice would want to come fight him instead of go after the flag. But in the show, it seemed like Annabeth had pretty much figured out who Percy's dad was, whereas in the show, she was like, I thought it was Zeus. In the book, she said, I thought I was Zeus, where in the show, she was just like, okay, come on, and pushes him to water to see, like, he wasn't fighting in water and felt stronger like he does in the books. So I thought that was pretty interesting. And also, a hellhound did not attack in the show. There was no, like, someone let him in, like, no mystery of something is going on. I thought that was interesting. And then the show left off with, hey, you're going to go on this quest. Whereas in the books, it's a little bit different. The biggest, like, takeaways is, like, the dreams are different. I'm very interested in the dreams. Overall, the show is done really well. Like, it is produced really well. It's written really well. It's very close to the books. Like, yeah, there are differences, but of course there's differences, but the differences are from, like, Rick chose them, which I think is a big deal. Like, Rick said, this is going to be a little different. So I'm trying to keep that in mind as, like, we watch it. I'm excited to see what else comes. It's interesting how they broke up the book. I think it's in very good spots. Other big takeaways are, I'm intrigued to see where Annabeth's character goes, because it's a little different. But I'm excited that it's a little different. I don't know. I like that they're being a little bit more coy with the prophecy and things like that. Like, we're gonna find this all out in time. It's not all laid out there. Whereas in the book, I think they had to really get you hooked on stuff. I don't know. But I am intrigued to find out how they're going to lay things out in a different order than it's already laid out. We know that the episode 3 we're gonna see Medusa. They are gonna leave camp, etc. So I'm excited to see if some of this other stuff is gonna come in, if they're gonna mention some of this other stuff that was in the beginning of the book, like with Olympus and all of that stuff, if that's going to be kind of a conversation between Annabeth, Grover, and Percy as they're on their way in the quest. So we shall see. That is it for now. I'm very excited. So we'll see where it goes. I'll kind of continue. I'm not going to do another big episode like this. Obviously it was the first 2 episodes and I was very excited to see it. But I will probably keep writing about it. We'll see. I don't know. Or maybe I'll just kind of throw it in. But I'm excited to see where it goes, as I've said about 6 million times already. And I will see you all next week. Thank you so much for watching.